Hello and welcome to episode 374 of Sutton Impact Family Style. Should write that number down. I'm Jason and I'm joined by.
Brad and Keaton Moore.
Well, I guess first,
Jason, how are you?
congratulations nationally to the Boston Celtics, and then congratulations to you guys as you are New England people and you like the Celtics.
We have been huge Celtics fans, not just like bandwagoners. We got through all the years where they really sucked and started to kind of build things up. So yeah, we're definitely excited, and we also, not pompous like New England fans, realize how lucky we've been for the past decade plus. So very thankful. But the biggest thing that we're thankful for, or that I'm thankful for, and I won't talk to you, Keaton, but is that they won and really kind of like proved that whole team model is is an effective way that you can win. Not the only way, but like in the NBA, it's nice to know that like you don't just need to have like, okay, it's the top player from the series and that team's going to win. Like that kind of became like an old formula a little while ago. So it's nice that they beat a team that has like a top two or three player in the league in Luka,
Yeah.
and did so as a team. So that was the part that I most enjoyed.
I agree. I don't have too much to add, honestly. Just excited. It's been awesome because we've grown up. For me, like kind of grown up with the team a little bit. Some of those guys with Tatum and Brown. It was cool to see Brown really step up a lot this year. I guess we kind of were looking for a little bit more from Tatum, right? But he still was awesome in the closeout game in Game 5. But it was really cool to see Brown step up as not really a Batman and Robin situation anymore. It's a little bit more of we kind of have two Batmans.
Or an Iron Man and a Hulk, however you
It's
want to.
fun
Yeah.
going, looking into future years. Excited to see what the next year is going to have for him already.
Yeah, I know from my standpoint as a non-Celtics fan on the outside, like, I mean, it's been almost 5 years of should they break up Jalen and Tatum, right? Jalen, Jason. Like, we need to break them up. Trade one of them, trade one of them, trade one of them. And the Celtics, just kept building around them and stood pat with their guys, and they won the chip. And they've been in it every year for the last 5 years, so it's hard to even fault them on that.
Yeah, and and to buy into or to sell into the New England tone, it was wicked smart. That's horrible, but
Yeah.
like I think the other thing about the run that was fun was seeing Stevens build that team starting last year with the trade for White and giving up a first round pick and Romeo Langford of all pieces, right? Like
Yeah.
to get Smart seems like a genius move, and I think that you add that to the Horford one, which went under the radar, and then obviously the two we made this year with Drew Holiday and Porzingis, like those ones obviously stood out a lot more. But like he made 4 moves over the last 2 years that were like really high level moves, and when you look back on what he traded away, you're like, holy moly, like that's just a really smart move. So I like that aspect too. When it's a team that you root for that makes some solid decisions, and you can kind of see the work that they put into building that. That's always nice to see that pay off too, because that's just not always the case.
And then I guess we can pour one out for Dallas, who had an incredible run. Pretty much from the trade deadline on with PJ Washington, they were one of the best teams in the league, and they went through the West and made it to the finals. So, I mean, the Kyrie revived his career. I did want to know, and this is like I said, I texted you guys this would be like the stupid, morning ESPN show talking head part. But as good as Kyrie was this year, and Kyrie was amazing at times, I couldn't help but wonder like if they had just kept Brunson, because they could have had Brunson on almost the same deal if they had just signed him. And, is that a different team that you're going against? Because I feel like Brunson's not as exciting. I mean, well, I guess he is for me is exciting to watch, but I'd rather have him 10 out of 10 times on my team than Kyrie, and I still like Kyrie.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think the big thing is Brunson is awesome, and he was awesome even in Dallas. But
Yeah.
he really took a step forward, getting to be on his own, or be the primary ball handler in New York. And I just don't think that he's ever forever would have been this level of bucket getter that he is now on Dallas. So even though he would have been as like really good, I think the Celtics just had the perfect matchup for a guy like Kyrie, a guy like Brunson, where they have so much length. And I just think Brunson definitely would have probably had a better overall scoring output than Kyrie did. But I still think Brunson would have had to work so hard for every basket. And over the course of a 7-game series, where it's the end, it's the fourth series of the playoffs, I just think Brunson would have gotten worn down too. I just think that the Celtics were a really tough matchup for whatever small guard they were going to run into.
Yeah, I agree. I think the reason why I think that it wouldn't have worked is because, to your point, Keaton, Brunson really started to shine when his usage rate went through the roof, right? And that was a big thing. And it's awesome to see because he seems like an awesome guy to root for. I mean, if you're a New York fan, you're pumped to have him. He's all that you want.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if him and Luka could exist side to side where they're at their best. We can see that Brunson's at his best when he's, at that 30% plus usage rate. That he was never going to get that opportunity in Dallas just because it was always going to go through Luka. So as much as I can see where you're coming from, because there's a level of consistency that you can expect from Brunson that you can't get currently from Kyrie, I just don't know that would have existed in that same capacity.
Well, you turned that into a nice, normal talking segment. No screaming, no yelling. It was very on ESPN-like.
I do think it's interesting to look back on the pictures, only a few years ago, but of Dallas having Luka, Brunson, and KP on that team. That roster looks pretty good even looking at that now. Those three guys all had great years.
Yeah, their GM has done a pretty solid job. I mean, especially, even with the tanking and getting trading up to get Lively, PJ Washington, they built a nice team. It just wasn't enough.
Yeah, and I think, too, going back to the original Luka trade, Trae Young's a great player, but you talk about building your franchise around Luka versus Trae Young. I think you definitely feel like you have a better chance of winning a championship every year going in with Luka as your best player.
Yeah, what do you guys think? That was one of the questions I was going to ask, actually, because it kind of tied into some draft stuff. But, what do you think the motive... In the NBA, there's a lot of times you see trades happen during the draft, right?
Right.
Like this team drafted this player at 5, this team drafted this player at 8, and before the 10th pick is even picked, there's a swap of the picks, and nothing else. I don't never really understood that, but in that case, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when Atlanta drafted Luka and Dallas drafted Young, and they swapped. I'd be curious to hear from both of you guys. What do you think leads to those kind of situations? Where, is it a marketing thing, or suddenly they're like, hey, listen, we're bringing in this, this dude from Europe into Atlanta. Is he going to sell tickets for us? Instead, we're going to get trade. Is there a thing? Jay, is there anything that you've ever heard or any explanation as to how that stuff works during the NBA draft?
I mean, I know I heard on that particular one that it was a situation where the owner, partially due to the NCAA tournament, and that was one of the last years where I remember some college players, and Trae Young was so exciting and he looked so much like Steph, and everybody he's never been Steph, but I mean, and he's smaller than Steph, but you had a guy that could just shoot the lights out from anywhere on the floor, throw little lob passes, was really good at getting getting in front and just somehow making shots, and I think the owner just fell in love with the idea of this is our Steph Curry. And Steph Curry sells shoes, Steph Curry sells seats. And here's this foreign guy that, I don't know.
Right. No, that makes sense, especially to your point. I remember he was all sorts of talk in the NCAA tournament that year. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, I mean, people love Steph. I mean, that's, And I think Luka, even to this day, it always sounds stupid to talk about professional athletes not looking like athletes, especially one of Luka's caliber. But outside of his height, Luka does not look like an athlete, right? he's got a little bit of dad bod and a baby fat, however you want to call it. Like he doesn't look like he's in.
Yeah, no, him and Jokic.
Yeah.
Right? They both don't look the part.
No, they don't. And I think if your owner still has a little bit of that European bias, which we still see today, despite the fact that all the best players, including Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who's from Canada, don't come from America anymore. Like, I still think there was some of that bias. And then, like I said, I think there was all that he's the next Steph Curry, and I just don't think Atlanta could resist. And then Dallas wanted Luka from Jump Street, so because they knew him through Dirk and they had the international connections, and yeah, and now Atlanta might trade both DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. They're in a weird spot.
Yeah, I think that I would. Honestly, I think that Trae, he's awesome. And like you said, the whole selling point for him is really the deep shots and the quick scoring, the exciting scoring, the big plays. But he's gonna get picked apart defensively and throughout a playoff run. Each playoff series, you play the good teams, they're just gonna attack him. And he hasn't shown any ability to be able to hold up against that.
No.
And I just don't know if a team, as a team, every team should be going for a championship if he can really be your best player. And you're paying him too much to not be your best player right now, and I don't know if he would be willing to buy into that. And then on the other end, I think DeJounte Murray, I think he, a couple years ago, was one of the better, especially younger, two-way players in the game. But he, I don't know if it was the money or Atlanta, but he definitely, didn't put as much effort into defense as well. And I think that he isn't great enough offensively.
No.
To be a guy that is more of just an offensive option and not going to go defend the other team's best guard. And they're paying those guys so much money. You need such a specific player DNA, to win these days. That I think it's time to, I don't know about blow it up, but at least probably see what you can get for those two guys.
It's funny, your description of Trae, except for the bad defense, I thought you were talking about Big Richard.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, I think the best spot for Trae, but I just don't think that organization would take him, would be San Antonio. Because you have Victor at 7'6", blocking everybody's shots, making up for some of his lack of defense. And then Trae would be a great, running off of screens, catching, passes from Victor, throwing him lobs, shooting threes from the outside. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I just don't think the Spurs are the kind of organization would want Trae Young.
Yeah, I could see him causing Pop's head to blow up.
Yeah.
I could, but I could also see Pop potential. I could see a world where Pop has a really good effect on it. And him just buying into being the facilitator for Wemby, who is going to potentially be one of the best players of this generation. And, certainly one of the most unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really. It's crazy that he did not have more of an impact on that team. And we'll get into that, but he is a special player.
Well,
if you're the Spurs,
yeah.
If you're the Spurs, though, I feel like you hit the lottery with getting Wemby, especially when we take a look at this draft and the number one pick. Who the number one pick is going to be this year, but hitting on Wemby, it's such a rare occurrence, and who you put around him is so important. Is Trae Young really the number 2 star that you want to pair him with? Is he the guy that you want him? I don't know if it's as big of a deal as going out with, when they're not playing games and stuff, but still, is that the guy you want to pair him with for at least the near future? I don't know.
Yeah, but I guess we can transition into this, interesting draft. I've heard multiple scouts say that they typically have players ranked in tiers. So if you were LeBron James, if you were Victor Wembanyama, you were Anthony Davis, you were a tier 1 player. And, then you had a Ja Morant and a Dwayne Wade were probably tier 2 players. And obviously those guys have maybe elevated, and Dwayne Wade would be, but coming out of college, that's where they had them ranked. But they said in this draft, I've seen 2 or 3 scouts basically say they have no tier 1 players and no tier 2 players. That it's not that it's not that it's devoid of talent, but it's guys that don't seem to have the ceiling in most drafts, and that this is, there might be a lot of really good role players and six men and guys you'll end up really liking, but just nobody that's like, as they all said, one guy will come out of this and be great. It's just, it could be the 18th player or the 22nd player, or it could be a Jokic year where, the 36th player in the draft is somehow the best player.
Yeah, that's my general take on just the draft in and of itself. First and foremost, the draft, for whatever reason, is just like super exciting because it's just a draft. It's like teams, I can even like pay attention. I'm not going to watch it, but like I could even pay attention and watch the scroll for like who's getting drafted in the MLB. Like there's something about like teams adding these new players and these young players that I'm still like have some kind of weird like affection for. But like NBA and then obviously NFL being the top of the list, they're still exciting. However, that said, with the NBA draft for me, it certainly seems like it is as inexact of a science as there possibly could be. Like it's almost like every team at each pick is trying to find the next quarterback. In the NFL, finding a quarterback is never easy. Even teams that are like, we're picking the number one overall guy, don't always get it right with the quarterback that they pick. And in the NBA, like you go through the list of the last couple of years of like, who got picked where, and it's like there's so many misses. Yeah, there's some guys, especially like we're talking about, like with Victor, that that was you knew that was as solid of a pick as you could possibly ever want to make, right? But with all these other guys, you go through the top 10 picks in most years of any draft, and there's like probably 50% of the dudes who you might even never heard of again. And then there's guys, 20 through 30, where you're like, wow, this guy lasted until here. This guy lasted. These guys have been great. So it seems like a really, really tough thing to honestly assess, even for like the people who do it professionally for a living.
Hey, well, let's start this out with my fun. I'll bring the Steelers into this, okay? So we'll pretend that you're Mike Tomlin of the Steelers, where you're not going to get fired, right? You're unable to be fired if you're a Pittsburgh Steeler. So if you were in the Steelers situation as an NBA GM, where you knew like no matter who you picked, you weren't getting fired, who would you take with the number one overall pick? We'll start with you, Fred.
The guy that I think is probably going to be the best pro out of the group is actually Terrence Shannon from Illinois.
Okay.
Like, I'm all over this guy, but now I have to put this. I know that guy. He's down the list, late first round pick at best. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's older, and the league, especially early draft picks, they want dudes who are younger that they can develop. I honestly believe that if Shannon goes to a team that's like a contending team, that he's going to really surprise people and be potentially like, rookie of the year kind of thing. I just think he has that kind of skill level.
Okay.
But it's really based on the inside. That said, Keenan and I had the luxury of going to the summer league last year in Las Vegas, and even seeing the guys, some of the players, there were guys who were like, wow, this guy looks amazing. Like Cucifino is somebody who stands out where we're like, this guy's going to be like cracking the starting lineup after a couple months. He looks really, really good. I don't even know if he even got out of the G League last year. So I by no means am any kind of expert. Even watching a guy and watching what they do on the court and seeing how other players react. But I just think from a athleticism and the way he carries himself on the court, he reminds me of a player that could be just really, really talented.
Okay.
Something to add on that, certainly not my pick. I think that's a cool pick. But something to add on that is he's definitely NBA ready.
Yeah.
And that is a huge concern with, especially the top end of this draft is how many of these guys are going to come in and be able to contribute right away. And Shannon, some of these older dudes, I think, connect, have a chance to really come in and produce right away. So if that's what one of these teams feels like they need, right? The guy was a stud in college. For me, I think it's really, in the research that I've done, it looks like it's coming down to one of three guys, Sar, Klingon, or Risa Shea.
Okay.
And Klingon is the one where you know what you're getting. He's going to, big, huge dude, protect the rim, protect the paint, intimidate, affect shots. He's going to catch lobs. He's got a little bit of a post game, but he can't really shoot it all. And I don't know if he'll ever be able to develop that. But you know what you're getting from him. It's just tough, I feel like, to take him as your number one pick. Sar, another big man. I want to say he's been playing in Australia.
France. He's a Frenchin.
France.
Yeah.
Okay. I just haven't seen enough of him. He's super young, super athletic, and I know he has a good handle for his size, but it's just tough when there's so much unknown for me. I wouldn't be able to take him. That being said, though, I would probably take Risa Shea because even though another overseas guy, a little bit of an unknown, he has the body and frame. He's a big guy. I want to say 6'9", 6'10", but also pretty athletic, can handle, listed as a guard and a forward. So
yeah,
I think if I'm looking at, not even saying I'm Atlanta here, just saying in terms of who's on the board, he would be my pick because I think you look at overall potential, the type of what type of star could Klingon really end up being if he was able to reach his maximum potential. You look at Sar, same thing. I just think Risa Shea, his ceiling is, the type of guy who could be worthy of a number one pick, the type of guy you could build around. I don't know about that with the other guys. So I would take Risa Shea, but it's tough. I couldn't have any problem with Atlanta taking either other guy. What about you, Jason?
I think I'd take Castle from UConn. Freshman, combo guard, 6'5", giant wingspan, can create his own shot, can play defense. And he reminds me of a Nick, which is why I think I just like him. I think he could move right in and play on the Knicks. They won't get him, obviously. He's going to go way before that, but that's what I like about him. I feel the most solid, but he's sort of a little bit like Klingon, where he's probably, maybe 1/3 team NBA throughout his career, which isn't a bad thing if you're drafting somebody. It's just not somebody you'd be excited about in the lottery, right? We talked before the show started, and I thought Klingon reminded me of his ceiling is like Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson or, one of these big guys where it's like you want him on your team, he's going to contribute. He's going to be able to play playoff minutes at some point in his career, but he's never going to be all NBA first team, most likely. So, and the foreign.
You bring up a good point though, is that of the many different variables that are going to contribute to whether these guys are successful or not successful, is the coach that they're going to, right?
Right.
And the program that they were at. So, I think you mentioned the fact that Castle would be a great fit for the Knicks. And yes, we know that that's probably not going to happen unless the Knicks move up. But the genius behind that is that Danny Hurley, is one of those coaches that's really intense.
Yeah.
Then you go to Tibbs, for New York, who's really intense. And there's a lot of NBA guys who say they can't, they can't play for him because he's just all over everybody's case, right? So that's almost something I had never really thought about as much before in terms of that fit, not only in terms of the team and the coach, but did their college set them up to be successful in that kind of environment? That's an interesting piece.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the number one overall pick, and my job was on the line, I kind of agree with you, Kate. I like, Risa Shea, because it seems like he's got the highest ceiling, maybe. Because I've seen Sar play, and I don't think Sar is ever going to be... He scares me. I don't know why, but I just don't like him. And then...
That's the same thing with me. I see the hype and the potential there, but it just it's not for me.
No. And then the other guy that's being mentioned as the top overall pick is Reed Shepherd out of Kentucky, who is only 6'1" and a $192, with only a 6'3" wingspan. But if you look at his analytics, which people love analytics, he's like in the top percentile of shooters coming out in the last decade, and that's both unguarded, off the screen, off the dribble. He's got an insane vertical leap of like 42 inches, and he's got a nice basketball IQ. But when I look at him, my pro comp, and I don't know if people have already made this one, so if they already have, I didn't steal it, I just wasn't paying attention. But he reminds me of Malik Monk, another Kentucky guy, who just got a $70 million 3-year contract, I think. So clearly a guy that can play in the league, but I think is more suited to a 6th, 7th man role than a starter. And again, if you're drafting in the top 10, you're hoping you're getting, a multiple-time All-Star potentially, and not, a great 6-man or a Jamal Crawford type.
Yeah, Jay, I'm with you. Everything I've been seeing for Shepherd seems like he's pretty locked in with the Rockets if he fell that far.
Yeah.
But I'm with you in terms of he just seems. I don't know if I could take him at 1 because what he brings to the table you really like. But is it ever going to be, like you're saying, consistent day in, day out? I think of him, I like your comparison. Similar player for me, he reminds me a lot of like a younger CJ McCollum.
Yeah.
But maybe with almost a little bit more athleticism. So McCollum's a really refined, smooth scorer. And so Shepherd would have a lot of work, obviously, to get to be that. But in terms of his, it seems like IQ, athleticism, able to get a shot off, and just be ability to knock down the shot from mid-range and from 3. I could definitely see him carving out a nice career in the NBA. Just don't necessarily see it being an all-NBA type of career.
Right. And how big is McCollum?
6'3".
Yeah.
So he's got a couple inches at least on this guy. Like 6'1" again. And I brought the guy up earlier, but like that sounds a lot more like a Peyton Pritchard kind of guy, right? Who was like a knockdown shooter in college, and has taken 3 years to get to the point where he can be kept in the game because defensively teams were just going to pick on him his first years, right?
Yeah.
So that seems like one of those things that would be really, really tough. But to your first question, Jay, about like if you didn't have to worry about your job, maybe he's the guy you go with because, okay, maybe this guy can be Steph Curry, or maybe he can be like, what you guys are talking about. So, I don't know.
I think an interesting name, a guy I really liked going into last year, and, Fred mentioned that we got a chance to go to Vegas to see the Summer League last year, which was awesome. But one of the dudes who wasn't playing, but we actually got to see there was Ellis.
Okay.
And going into last year, I had heard awesome things, just seeing, getting to watch a couple of games, just on YouTube. He looked awesome. I guess in the G League, he just was, a little bit intimidated. Super young, light. He definitely needs to add some more strength and weight to his body, but he's the type of guy that I could see he'll probably end up being, in that 4 to 8 range. That I could see us in a few years looking back on as the type of guy who could have gotten taken higher.
And a guy I really like Ron Holland too from G League Ignite. I don't know if he's ever going to be a good pro, but I just like him. He plays with a lot of energy. He's an incredible athlete. 6'11" wingspan. He's only 18 years old. But I don't know if he's ever going to develop into a great basketball player. And they're talking about him in the top 10. And again, I don't know if that's a get you fired kind of guy, but I just don't know if he's ever going to have like a solid role in the NBA.
Jay, I'm with you. I think he definitely seems like that guy. Super, super athletic, big time high school player. He was out of Texas.
Yeah.
Duncanville was actually a nasty team, but he seems like a football player playing basketball. Just with how big he is and how athletic he is, he seemed. I'm with you though. It just will be interesting to see if he can translate. I know he was really turnover heavy for like a point forward.
Very.
In the G League, which we'll see how that translates. That's something you can rein in. But he absolutely seems like the type of player that the Utah Jazz will be taking at number 10. And last year they took Taylor Hendricks from UCF, who I feel like people didn't know a ton about and didn't really get to see a lot. And he was banged up, so I'm not knocking the Hendricks pick at all. But then they take a lot of those wild cards, and credit to them, they're typically a pretty good development organization.
Yeah, they are.
Maybe it's a great fit for him, but I could see him going there.
Well, he's just doing it. And I think you guys both touched on something that is what goes back to what I was talking about with this being such a crapshoot, which is these guys that you're drafting are 18 years old, 19 years old.
Yeah.
A guy who's 24 is considered ancient, but at least you know what you're going to, you have a better chance to know what you're going to get with the 24-year-old guy than the 18-year-old guy who could go in 1,000 different directions. That's, and in all of this, you have to try to figure out which 18-year-old is most likely to be on the path to stardom, as opposed to, being a forgotten child in 3 years.
I think what's funny too is how much pressure the pick itself adds to the decision, because so many of these guys, you could go through the whole list, but Shepard, Castle, any of the foreign guys, these picks, we're talking about taking them at 6, 7, 8, would be super excited for any of these guys. But at 1, it's just a different conversation, 1 or 2. There's a lot more pressure that goes into each of these picks, and the team feels it, the player's going to feel it, whether they like it or not. And, that's why a guy like Klingon almost kind of makes sense at 1.
Yeah.
Even though he doesn't really have that big star, especially scoring output potential. But he seems like the type of guy who could definitely handle that pressure and definitely come in day 1 and know what he brings to the table, contribute right away, be an anchor defensively, average 13 rebounds a game out of the gate. If he's able to play that many minutes, I think it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd buy that. I think that's a solid point.
Yeah, like I talked to you guys, considering Oklahoma City has 38 draft picks, I think it's 14 first and all the rest are seconds. Like, I think Klingon is exactly what that team needs. They don't need more scoring. They've got we got the J. Will, you got Chet, and you need some size next to Chet to protect the rim, and I think he'd be perfect for him. I know in the mocks a lot of them have him get Zach Edey, but I don't like Zach Edey. So I just don't think he's athletic enough to play in the league. I think he'll get run off the floor far too often.
I agree, Jay. I think there are matchups that he can be effective out there. You can put him out there, hey, work hard for 15 minutes. But you think about a game, so many of these good teams nowadays, the Pacers aren't going anywhere. These teams that are really run and gun.
Yeah.
And it's just really hard to imagine Edey being able to keep up with that tempo of pace, but then also, even in the half court, the NBA game is much more spread out. And even though Edey did a good job of defending the pick and roll in college for the most part,
Yeah.
spots, he will definitely get picked apart in the NBA. I would think. You would think. Maybe he proves us wrong, but I just think him coming off of a screen, past the 3-point line, getting switched onto De'Aaron Fox is going to be a problem for him.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine him playing in the playoffs to me. Like, I feel like during the regular season, you can have him out there 15, 20 minutes a game, and he can, alter some shots, block some things. But I feel like when you're in a playoff series, I just think he'd get run off the floor every time. He'd be a liability. Like, maybe like early Rudy, but he would never become whatever Gobert's become, because he's not as athletic as Gobert. I think even old Rudy Gobert is still more athletic than Zach Edey's ever been.
Yeah, exactly right. Edey will definitely, I could see him being a guy that comes in and scores a lot for the amounts of minutes that he's going to play. Come in and hey, here's a quick 10 points. Almost like if Taco Fall was refined a few inches shorter, maybe a little bit more athletic a few years ago.
Taco, yeah.
I feel like Edey could be that guy that comes in and like sparks your team for a little bit, but it's hard to imagine him ever being a productive everyday center, whether that's being a starter or coming off the bench.
Yeah, and Jay, you had mentioned, OKC getting Klingon. I mean, is there another big man that you could see OKC possibly setting up a trade for? Because I kind of see OKC as the next version of the Celtics from the standpoint that they have this really solid core in Shea and Chet and Williams that they can kind of build around.
Yeah.
But now it's a matter of taking some of those young pieces that they've been able to draft over the years and all of the draft capital that they have, and you go to a team, that has, a big dude that, maybe you don't get a ton out of offensively, but that is going to be that defensive anchor for you.
Well,
With those other three guys, you don't necessarily need the offense, but you need
right.
that defensive. Yeah.
Well, the thing I worry about them is they've been a team that doesn't like to spend money. And if you're going to have to in the next 3 or 4 seasons when you're in your window, Shea's deal kicks in, J-Dub's going to get a deal, and I assume Chet's going to get a deal. So if you bring in, you trade with, let's say Cleveland was willing to give up Jared Allen. You got to pay Jared Allen. Even Claxton, some of those guys that might be free agents or might be available. I think that's why I think, their biggest... They've never, they traded James Harden because they were cheap. They just... Right. Not cheap, but they just don't want to go into the luxury tax. They don't want to be an apron team. And you're contending right now, and I think, the Caruso trade that we'll get to, I will have one more thing with the draft. I think that was a nice pickup, but they're not a team that I think wants to spend a lot. So if you brought in, a big man, you have to pay. Maybe it makes sense because they are they had the best record in the West. You just brought in Caruso. If you brought in, and I'm not even saying it's available, but a Jared Allen or somebody along those lines, that would really change your fortunes. But I just feel like if you can get Edie on a 5-year rookie contract or whatever, what's the NBA, 4 years?
4 years.
Yeah, for not Edie, Klingon, I think that'd be a really nice fit for them.
Yeah, Jay, I think that's a great point, especially bringing in Claxton. That's what I was going to bring in, as that's really their other option, is either trying to get somebody in the draft or one of those guys in free agency. And it's a really tough market for those guys. I think that all of us here are fans of Hartenstein.
I love Hartenstein, yeah.
He's going to ask for a lot of money, and he's earned it. He's earned to be paid, but is it worth paying him as much as you're going to be paying him, like you're saying, as your fourth option? Is that going to be, especially for a small market team and for a GM and Presti who notoriously does, like you said, doesn't really like paying these guys?
No.
Especially if he's not going to come in and be your best player. So I think it makes a lot of sense to get somebody in the draft. But if Klingon is their guy, that they feel like it fits, they have the picks to overpay. And, we'll talk about it with the trade that they made. But they have so many picks at their disposal, and they're never going to be able to,
No, never.
If everything worked out perfectly and they hit on all of them, they can't all play. So they have to move some of them, and you might as well use them while you have one of the best players, in franchise history, in his prime.
Yeah.
Why not go for it now?
And you're sitting there where a year that you could get the first round, you could probably get it pretty cheap, the first pick overall. Moving from 12 to, if you gave up 12, and if you're Atlanta, I'd much rather have, 2 other first-round picks in other seasons where I've got a shot at a superstar than, rolling the dice with Sarr or somebody else. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't know. But to wrap up the draft, let's all talk about one more player we like. It doesn't have to be a full sleeper, because the guy I'm going to bring up, I really like Dillingham from Kentucky. Another sort of smallish point guard, but he can shoot. He's only 6'1", again, not a big wingspan, but that dude can shoot the lights out. And again, maybe he's more of a 6th, 7th man, but I really like him.
I think he's awesome. He's so fun to watch. He's so fast.
Yeah.
Fit will be really important for him.
Exactly.
To save the team. I think Calipari was a perfect college coach for him because he, to a degree, let him do his thing. And that's why he came off the bench. But in the pros, obviously, you can't necessarily do that, and shot selection is so important. And even though he can really make any shot he's going to take, it'll be really interesting to see where he goes, because I'm a big fan of his too.
And I think his measurements, I think he's 6'1", 160 pounds, and only a 6'3" wingspan. So again, as good as he's very small.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. It's hard to envision him ever really building a big career, just as a starter.
Yeah.
But you could see him totally being, like a Lou Williams type of guy that comes in, Jamal Crawford, and maybe a little bit smaller than those guys, but like a good sixth man.
Yeah, one of another guy that I think is kind of like under the radar, and again, it's going to be fit like all these guys, is Darren Holmes from Dayton. Like, we've had the ability to kind of see him a couple times. Smooth guy, seems super coachable, but long. Seems like he'll be able to play in the league. Has a couple different, offensive moves that are going to make him, give him some options. Just like one thing, but athletic enough where I think that he could fit in well.
Yeah.
And again, he's somebody that they're talking about falling towards the later rounds. So if he ended up on Denver, for example, like, I could see him being a dude that like ends up fitting their scheme really, really well. Now, granted, is he going to take a ton of minutes away from like Aaron Gordon? Probably not. But you're going to feel a lot better about like giving Aaron Gordon an extra 5, 6, 7 minutes on the bench if you got this guy coming off it. So I think that's another guy who I feel is just ready to make an impact in the league in a short period of time. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is looking at it from a standpoint like, who's going to be the best pick when we look back on this 2 or 3 years from now, versus who's going to be the best pick when we look back on it 5 or 6 years from now. It's going to be a different guy in either case.
Yeah.
That's great. For me, one of the guys I really like is a little bit more middle to late first round that I've been seeing is Yves Missi, I think is how you say it, freshman center from Baylor.
Yeah.
But I, got to see him play a few times. Mainly was watching for Jacoby Walter, but Missi stood out to me every time I watched him, mainly just from his energy. And it was just cool to see. I feel like, especially in recent years, college basketball, especially Big 12, there's been a lot of good big men, and Kansas gets a lot of them. But it's rare to see a guy like Missi who's so energetic, and I think that he's a legit 7-footer, but moves well. From what I understand, doesn't have any sort of injury history. I could be wrong on that, but that's a big deal just for any 7-footer who's moving. You need him to be out there. I like that, but the big thing is just energy and effort defensively. Guy blocks any and every shot, will get any rebound. And I think when you're looking at a class that has a lot of big men, Klingon being one of those top guys who he's the cream of the crop out of this class in terms of being a rim protector. Sarr is supposed to be the same thing, especially as a rim runner. You look at a lot of these guys, but I think that Missi, a team could take him mid to late first round and get a guy that's going to be a lot like a Nick Claxton, but Missi's a little bit of a better shooter. He's not a three-point shooter, but he can make the mid-range. I just see his game translating to the NBA. I really value – it's a small thing, but I really value a guy that just competes, and he's one of those guys where 2 minutes into the game, drenched in sweat, fist pumping, like, hopefully he can rein it in, not get into foul trouble. That's a big issue for the young guy, for big men, but I think that I would love to see him end up on, like, an Orlando, who has a couple of great young players that they're building around, and it aren't going to be asking a guy like Missi to come in and be putting up points right away. He might not even start right away. And as good as Wendell Carter's been, he's not a rim protector at all. He averaged half a block this year. And I think bringing in a guy like Missi, as well as whatever Orlando's going to do at shooting in free agency, that's a team that could immediately be competing, like Indiana was this year, for a chance to go to the, NBA Finals with a little bit of run protection. So I could see him. I like him, even though being a young guy, I could see him contributing right away.
Well, in honor of Stephen A. Smith getting about $25 million a year is what he's asking for, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't propose the question. If you're a top 10 pick, or you're a top 10 pick this year, and if you drafted Bronny James, you got 40-year-old LeBron James for one season. Who wouldn't draft LeBron James one? Everybody would.
I'm so glad you brought that. I had that written down. Like so. Well, but let me put it to you this way. Another way. I kind of feel like that's a reasonable ask, but more so if you're looking like Toronto, Portland, Minnesota, Memphis, those teams are like within. I think those teams are all within the top 5 picks of the second round.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make? I mean, second round picks, they're a flyer anyways. Like historically, maybe there's 2 guys on average that come out of the second round each year. Why not take a pick for a guy that you're like, okay, we know we're taking Bronny. If we put him at the end of the bench just to get his dad to come in, then great. If his dad doesn't come in, then he's going to the G League. Like, that's no different than who we'd be picking in the second round pick anyways. It's the same thing that you could say that Cleveland did with Mobley's brother, and the same thing that Milwaukee did with Giannis's brother, right? Like, pick somebody just to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, it's, an undersized guy that had almost no production in college. So, obviously had the heart condition. But, yeah, it's just sort of like, oh, yeah, we had to talk about him, though.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I think that even if you're bringing in LeBron, what is he really bringing to you? I know, maybe if it's a team like a Memphis or somebody who, I honestly heard one team that I heard a lot of for LeBron was the Clippers, because they're going to be opening up the new arena, and Ballmer wants to make sure that they're going to be selling out, or selling as many tickets as they can. And a guy like that, like, that's the only situation where I could see the team prioritizing, like, just that sort of part of LeBron over the basketball part. And
ticket sales over.
Yeah, and even though a second round pick typically isn't going to amount to much, I just don't know. You have to have, some inkling that Bronny is going to be, producing at some, at the NBA level at some point. But I'm with Jay. I just haven't seen enough. He wasn't even able to, I know he was recovering from the heart thing or the chest thing this season, but he just wasn't really able to play much. And he played really high level basketball in high school and was good, but not necessarily all 4 years. So we got to see more from him before my team is using picks just to bring in his dad.
Fair enough. I do think that, last point on that too, in all honesty, I think that would ruin any team chemistry on any professional team, to be quite honest. If you're keeping Bronny James on the roster just to appease his father, who you brought in, and kind of like almost like a Mufasa type fashion. Anybody who's seen Lion King, like, they got Mufasa. Spoiler alert! Like, Mufasa dies, but like, it was the son that got used as the bait. Like, in that kind of situation, that's just not going to go over well with a group with 13 other professional basketball players, in my opinion. So I think it's funny to think about, but I do think it would be an absolute recipe for disaster, to be fully candid.
Yeah, the one weirdo scenario I'll give you, because I think as I get older, maybe I just want an old team, but I would love to see Golden State get him, keep Chris Paul, have LeBron come play with Steph, Draymond, re-sign Clay, and then trade all your young guys for KD, and just have, like, everybody 38 or older, and see if you can win the chip.
Wow.
Old guy. This is like a Uncle Drew kind of like.
An Uncle Drew, yeah. Just the old heads, just everybody's in their late 30s. But they've all been, all-stars. So it's like, to see, I would enjoy it. I don't know. I think that'd be a nice run for them.
If the league was hurting for ratings, it'd be great.
That'd be the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have 2 more big NBA stories. I guess congratulations, JJ Redick. I actually like the hire. I don't know what you guys think.
I'm a fan of anybody. Like, I think that the interesting thing about coaching, the profession of coaching that's happened over the last 10 years, is that at almost every level, it's worse at, like, youth and high school and AAU kind of levels, but it still exists at the highest levels as well. There used to be this notion that when somebody came in as a coach, they had a level of respect that came with that job, and it was theirs to kind of either stay at that level or lose respect. Whereas now, with just kind of like media and the scrutiny and everything that goes on, it seems like those coaching positions are automatically, you're coming in with like very little respect, and you have to earn it all, right? And so that said, I'm going to give, regardless of how he got there, I'm going to give the guy his due level of respect until he proves that he doesn't deserve it. So if they think that that's the right person for the team, I'm all about it. And I think it's better to go that way than just like kind of like old retreads that, you know, haven't proven to be successful. So why are they going to suddenly be successful now? Like, at least take a different shot. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think I like the hire as well. You never know with a first-time coach. I saw a graphic on ESPN the other day that his coaching, or no, I think it was Fox, but his coaching experience was prior to this. He was coaching he was a volunteer coach for a fourth grade like CYO.
Yeah, he was.
Team. And so, you know, it's going to be, this is a little bit of a step up from that, but I think two big reasons that I like it for me is he is extremely intelligent in basketball, and I think that you hear a lot about how rare it is to hear former players who are bought into the analytics side of basketball, and he is definitely into the both ends of those. I mean, you listen to 5 minutes of his podcast.
Oh yeah.
And it's super in depth. It's a great listen, but which is hard for me to promote as a UNC fan. But I think that part makes a lot of sense in terms of today's NBA. But then also he has a really good relationship with LeBron, and he has LeBron's respect. LeBron's been on his podcast a few times, I think. But
they have their own podcast together.
Being able to, they talk about if you can't manage your stars, you're not going to be able to coach at all in the NBA. And I think LeBron is going to be one of the toughest stars to be able to wrangle in at all. And having a guy come in with a pre-existing relationship to LeBron, I believe in a healthy way. Like, I don't think that it doesn't seem like it would be abused in any way.
No.
Hopefully, JJ can keep that healthy. And I could see it working. I mean, they just need to add one more piece. And even though LeBron's so old, or he's older, I could see them still making a push. I don't necessarily see them being a top regular season seed, but I could see them getting into the playoffs and making a push. Like, with one
they're
more
the
time
defending
LeBron.
mid-season tournament champions, so we can't forget that. And then I guess our last NBA story is Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, straight up trade, Bulls and OKC. And seems like we've all come around. We all like the trade, right, for both teams?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. To be honest, as a neutral fan of the trade, I would think that I think Chicago comes away as the greater winner if you strictly look at the value of each piece. I think that Giddey this year was, I would think, a one-off year for him. It was a really weird off-season. We know he was dealing with the legal stuff, and then he comes in dealing with all that as a 21-year-old. Comes in, Shea is he's taken this leap into a top 5 NBA player. He has the ball in his hands a lot, and now this team is awesome. And they're not going to be forcing the ball into your hands necessarily to screw up any rhythm that this team has, considering they were one of the best. They ended up being the number 1 seed in the West. And,
yeah.
So I think that it's a great situation for him, because not only is it a new team in a very different part of the country, but he's going to be able to have the ball in his hands a lot where he's at his best. He's not going to be the primary guy with Kobe White being there, but he's in a situation where they're not going to be a great team. They're going to be like, hey, we like you. We traded for you. Here's the ball. And so I think that they'll be good, or he'll be good there. And then I think from the Thunder's perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You might say that he was a little Giddey for Caruso straight up is a little bit of an overpayment, but as we talked about with them and all their picks, they're in win now mode. They know how hard it is now that they made it to the playoffs, or to win in the playoffs. And I think that Caruso is one of the best, if not the best, perimeter defender in the game. Right up there with Drew Holiday, and putting him alongside Lou Dort as your two primary defenders is scary in the West. And then you put him alongside Shea as those are your two backcourt mates. It's a really, really scary team, 1 through 5. So I like the move for both sides. So I'm interested what you guys think.
Yeah, I love it. Like I said, I think,
Go ahead, yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, just like with Boston, you had all this, they shut down Luka for the most part, not as much as you can shut him down. And that's the team that took you always want to be able to counterpunch the team that beats you. And Oklahoma City just got outscored by Dallas. And now you have another perimeter defender and another year in your system with the other guys. And like now, I feel like you'd be favored against Dallas, even though you lost to them last year. So I like that. And then like they said with Giddey, look at his numbers historically, and they're really good. He's not a great shooter, but I think if you're the Bulls and you can dump Vucevic, if you can somehow dump Levine, and I don't know how you do that because he's got 3 years left, and his last year is $49 million, and the guy just can't stay healthy. But you could have a nice young Kobe White, Josh Giddey, whoever you add now, and just have a young, run, fun and gun Bulls team to try to like rebuild some of your fan base.
Yeah, and I think that, the Caruso piece is a great ad for OKC. See, he's one of those guys, just like a guy that doesn't get a lot of credit, but you saw the impact that he left or the impact that was created when he left LA.
Yeah.
Right? Like there was a big drop for the Lakers post Caruso, and nobody necessarily would have seen that happening. But the things that he does to kind of facilitate the game for other players. And Jay, to your point, the reason why the Celtics worked and OKC didn't work defensively against Luka is that if you just have the one guy, they're just going to run switches and get on somebody else who's an easier guy to get by, right? Whereas now, to Keaton's point, when you're talking about like, okay, you start Dort on him, and then you can switch it up, and you got Caruso to kind of like back in. Meanwhile, those guys are switching in the background, so that way if there is another switch on defense, sets one of those guys up, it just makes it so that a guy like Luka, or really any star, backcourt star for any of the teams in the West, have to work so hard to get the play going that, come mid-third quarter and fourth quarter, they're toast. So I do think that it's really good. And yes, I definitely think that it could be a great move for Giddey, and hopefully a start for Chicago to kind of become viable again, because that's a city that, as a Patriots fan, we know what it feels like to once have had greatness and then now like be in like the exact opposite, side of things. And the Bulls have been certainly more relevant over the last 10 years than the Patriots have been for the last 5. So I'm not saying it's to that same extreme, but a city that had experienced such greatness from a basketball standpoint, now to be going through this, they need something to get excited about. And so hopefully this is the start to some positive moves for Chicago to kind of return that, reignite that fire for NBA in that city.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a full NBA podcast tonight. And everybody go watch the hockey game tonight, Game 7. Well, I won't post this till tomorrow, so it'll already be over. But we're rooting for Edmonton to finish the down 0-3 comeback, if possible.
Yeah, go Canada.
I know I was going to ask you guys who you're picking to win, but I'm glad that we were already on the same page. For picking anyone.
Because it's also if you're the NHL. Like, I feel like the NHL's always been what it is, but like McDavid is such a good player. Like, and to see him get a little bit, if he comes back, and it's, the game right now, end of the first period, tied 1-1 as we end our podcast. So it's going to be a nail biter.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you guys again. I think we might get back to football next week for everybody listening, unless there's been some big NBA news. We'll cover the draft, but I feel like we covered a lot of it tonight. We'll recap it, but I don't think there's that much more thing unless we get a big trade. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Jay.